welcome. My name is John, and I'm just here to discuss movies on the YT. And if you'd like to join that discussion, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well. And today, I'm continuing my Zack Snyder review series. This is a little late. I want to do these on Wednesdays, but nonetheless, I ended up having to delay this one just a little bit. But I'm still going to be able to get through these. I should easily get through them, hopefully by the time the Snyder Cut releases. And I was excited to do this one, which is partly why it got delayed a little bit. It was me trying to figure out how to talk about it, because I could go on and on about this movie for a long time. And so I guess let's just get started. So in Zack Snyder's Watchmen from 2009, the comedian, this retired superhero, gets murdered, and it causes Rorschach and the rest of the heroes to get into this investigation, which unravels to this big conspiracy, spoiler alert, involving Ozymandias. So getting started talking about the action, and just to clarify, this is all based off of the director's cut. I haven't seen the theatrical cut in a long time, and honestly, I don't fully remember what was on which cut. I always watch the director's cut. And so if these scenes aren't in the theatrical cut, and you've only seen the theatrical cut, I apologize. But anyway, the opening fight scene with a comedian, which I know is in both cuts, that is great. You also have the fight scene when they apprehend. It's a small one, but it's one that always stuck out to me. And that's when they apprehend Rorschach after he's framed. Then obviously you got the great prison breakout. I love that scene, especially with Rorschach. I'm a big Rorschach fan. This might not necessarily be the most action-packed if you go by the amount of action scenes as some other comic book movies or superhero movies out there. But at the same time, it still feels just as action-packed. The action scenes feel very memorable. Like I previously stated in my 300 review, Zack Snyder does a great job filming action, making it to where you can kind of see all the little details happening, whether it's because of a wide shot done in kind of slow-mo, or whether it's close-up shots of guns and everything. He does a good job of making you see and feel all the minor details to help enhance the action scenes. That being said, I don't necessarily think Watchmen, in terms of action scenes themselves, is necessarily his best. I think 300 and maybe even another one might have better standalone action scenes, but that's nothing that holds this movie back. I still think they're great action scenes. And getting into the acting and the characters, now, as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of this movie. And if I had a gun pointed at my head and I had to pick one of these 5 categories I talk about and had to pick one to be the weakest, it would be the acting category. But I still think I think the casting of the characters is great. I've always considered Patrick Wilson a very underrated actor in terms of his quality and his skill. And obviously, I think Jackie Earle Haley is the perfect casting. I think Matthew Goode does a great job with Ozymandias. I've always been a fan of Eric Bana. And then you have Malin Ackerman in here, who doesn't get a lot of blockbuster roles. She might be the weakest one out of all of the main cast. And even though acting would probably, with a gun to point it at my head, would be the one I would choose as the weakest category of the film, or weakest aspect of the film or the movie, I still think the characters are amazingly good, because you kind of have these characters that are almost like dark satires, not comedic satires like The Boys, but like a dark satire. Especially the big examples for me would be Night Owl and Rorschach, because it always kind of feels like Night Owl and Rorschach are like the two dichotomies of Batman. You have Night Owl, which is more the stoic, I guess you could say, human Bruce Wayne side of Batman, and then Rorschach is the like I am vengeance side of Batman. And I just like how in this movie those two kind of go and combat against each other. And you just get stuff like that in this movie. And there's just so much to unravel with these characters. And I might get more into the themes and stuff when we get to the story aspect. But moving on to the visuals, I think the visuals here are spectacular. I think the lighting, the production design, everything, it's like perfect for a Watchmen movie. He brings the comic panels to life here, and it just enhances the quality of the movie, in my opinion. The special effects, in my opinion, still hold up today. I love the visual style and look of this movie, so I don't want to harp on this category or this section too much. So moving on to the story and the writing, this might be the brightest aspect of this movie for me, because something I'll mention quickly here that will end up, which I will complain about in a future movie of his that might also be DC related. In this movie, he does flashbacks extremely well. They're all triggered at the right moments, and they're not necessarily randomly appearing while someone kneels in the Arctic, so they don't abruptly interrupt the main plot line. And so the way he tells the story, he tells it in this perfectly paced just manner to help you dive deep into who these characters are. And just this movie is just extremely thematically rich for me. And I'm someone that can forgive quite a bit of plot holes as long as the film itself feels thematically rich, because that's the biggest thing for me personally, is the themes of the movie. And like I mentioned, I consider this a dark satire, not a comedic satire. And just getting back to kind of the story and the themes of this movie, it's ahead of its time by quite a bit, because it's like a perfect dark satire, not comedic satire, of a genre that wasn't even fully realized yet. Because the MCU hadn't even been fully developed yet. There'd only been a couple movies by this point. Yeah, you had the Dark Knight trilogy, but you look at comic book movies and superhero movies when this was coming out, and you were having Ghost Rider, which I'm a fan of, unlike most people, but same goes for I believe Tim Story, Fantastic Four movies. These are the superhero movies I grew up with, and I have a fondness for some of them, and even though you also had the Raimi and Spider-Man and Singer X-Men, but you didn't have this fully realized genre yet. And yet he was still able to create this perfect dark satire for that genre, even if it hadn't been fully realized yet. And then also one of the big changes this movie does from the comic, even though most of the movie almost feels like a direct adaptation at times, the movie doesn't use the giant squid. They instead do a thing where they basically make it look like Dr. Manhattan was destroying the world or whatever. And I think for a cinematic take, I think that works well and works a little better, honestly. And I honestly just love how at the end of the movie, the villain is the victorious person, not the heroes. And I think Ozymandias is arguably, as a character, if you mix in performance and stuff, obviously Heath Ledger takes the cake for me. But I would honestly put Ozymandias up there as arguably the best or one of the best comic book movie supervillains out there. His whole plan is ingenious, and it really makes you think as well in terms of how you accomplish world peace. And just I love this movie so much. It can sometimes feel like a chore because it's 3 hours long, but it's a very rewarding watch still nonetheless. And now getting into the sound, the last category. This is one that a lot of people probably are mixed on. I personally really love the soundtrack. Even the cheesy, notorious Hallelujah part of the movie, I think while it does feel a little cheesy, There's also a couple other moments I think that feel slightly cheesy, like the Nixon panic room or situation room moments. But I think that kind of adds to the dark satireness of the movie and helps to enhance it, in my opinion. And so you have that, plus just the soundtrack and the score in general. You have Leonard Cohen throughout this movie, not just the Hallelujah one. And just the score in general. Tyler Bates, the guy who did the Magnificent 300 score, also does the Watchmen score, and I love it. I might prefer the 300 as a score, but this is still a great score, and it's mixed extremely well with the soundtrack. So overall, you could probably tell I'm a big fan of this movie. I haven't mentioned a single negative yet, and I just think this is just a phenomenal, epic superhero comic book movie that tells a story that is a decade ahead of its time. You look at things like nowadays, like The Boys, even stuff like Doom Patrol, how they play on the superhero tropes and comic book movie tropes, and how this movie also does that, even though it's less comedic than those. And those TV shows, obviously The Boys is extremely popular. Doom Patrol has a lot of critical success. And I just think you look at stuff like that, you look at Watchmen from like a decade before those movies even came out, and it's just as good, if not better, than those. And so I fully believe this is just a movie that was ahead of its time. And so honestly, I have to give Zack Snyder's Watchmen an APAP, an as perfect as possible, because technically there's no such thing as a perfect movie. 5 out of 5. So thanks for watching this video. This is somewhat of a divisive movie within comic book movie fandom. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether you agree, disagree, think I'm an idiot, whatever the case may be. I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. And if you've seen the ultimate cut of this, I actually own it, but the ultimate cut is only on the 4K disc. The director's cut is on the Blu-ray disc. And I don't have a 4K player, so I've never been able to actually watch the ultimate cut, which incorporates the Tales of the Black Freighter animated short or into the director's cut. And so it's like 3.5 hours long. And I really do want to watch it someday, but I haven't had a chance to watch it. And so if you've seen it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, even in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this review, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that thumbs up icon, smash that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell as well, because after these first 3 reviews is where this review series gets more interesting. Next we have a movie that the only Zack Snyder movie I've never actually seen before, and I believe it's even an animated movie, so that'll be interesting. And then you have a couple. Then you kind of get into the divisive DCEU stuff, which will be a lot of fun to talk about, I guess. Maybe not so much fun in the comments section, depending on how people react. But nonetheless, stay tuned, and I will return next time when I see you again.